Well, howdy everyone. Today I'm going to review the living daylights out of Canon's 40mm f2.8 STM Pancake lens. I'm going to show you all kinds of things about whether this cute little thing is a good lens for you. But first I want to quickly say congratulations to Josh Sarwano for being the first to comment on no less than 2 of my previous lens reviews. I appreciate all my subscribers, but no one else came even close to commenting so quickly, so good work Josh. I'm sure that other great achievements are in store for your future, despite your potty mouth. Anyway, this is called a pancake lens because it's so very thin. This is by far the smallest lens Canon makes, which makes it very cute and very convenient to carry around. The idea is for it to fit nicely on smaller camera bodies to make your camera a bit more portable, but it also works on larger camera bodies, which is helpful because I'm going to test it on my Canon 60D. A lot of people have scratched their heads over the 40mm focal length of this lens, but after using it for a while I quite like it. I always felt that on an APS-C camera, 50mm lenses are too zoomed in for general use. So using this 40mm lens was a breath of fresh air. Maybe it's just me, but I really like the wider angle. It's still zoomed in enough to emphasize your subject, but wide enough to also get the bigger picture. The wider angle also means you can use slower shutter speeds without getting such a blurry image. So 40mm is generally much easier to use than 50. And if you're using the lens on one of Canon's full frame or film cameras, then the angle will be even wider. This lens's maximum aperture is f2.8, which is reasonably fast, letting in almost 4 times more light than your kit lens does at 40mm. I would have liked an even faster aperture, but f2.8 generally isn't bad, it's pretty good, and this lens is just about capable of getting good shots in the dark, although it doesn't have image stabilization. An f2.8 aperture doesn't just let in more light, it gives you a narrower depth of field so your background goes even more out of focus. Here you can see the difference between the f2.8 aperture offered by the 40mm STM and the f5.6 aperture offered by Canon's kit lens. As you can see, there's quite a nice difference in the blurry background. The wide f2.8 aperture can really help you to get portrait shots, although they'll never be quite as good as those taken with an f1.8 or 1.4 lens. Now let's look at build quality. This is one of Canon's cheapest lenses, but it's actually built very nicely. It has a metal mount, and although it's light, it feels like it's built to last. The focus ring is very nice and smooth, and although it's actually coupled directly to the focus motor, it's very responsive. Canon's STM autofocus motor is quite new and interesting. It's designed to provide a much smoother and quieter autofocus, especially with Canon's newer camera bodies. It's certainly one of the quietest lenses I've ever worked with, although its sound can still be heard on the internal microphone when you're recording video, as you can hear here. Let's look at the image quality. It's all great news. Even with the aperture wide open at f2.8, this lens is very sharp indeed in the middle, with really good colours and contrast. The lens is also nicely sharp in the corners, with only the slightest hint of magenta chromatic aberration, which you can see on the edges of the windows. Basically, the image is fantastic, and when we stop down to f4, the picture becomes razor sharp from the corners back to the middle. The picture quality stays very sharp indeed until you stop down to f22, where the natural effects of diffraction kick in and things get a little soft. But overall, this is an extremely sharp lens no matter what you do with it, and its image quality can only be praised. There really are very few image quality issues with this lens to speak of. As I mentioned, the colours and contrast are very good, there's little distortion, and the lens works really well against bright light. I think the quality of the bokeh, or the background blur, is fairly smooth, and the out of focus highlights are never distracting. This lens's only real weakness is vignetting, or darkness, which you can see in the corner of the images. This is a little unsurprising as the lens's front element is so tiny. Here you can see it on my 60D at f2.8, but at f4 it's gone away. But if you're using one of Canon's expensive full-frame cameras or a film camera, you can see the vignetting is pretty strong in the corners. Here's a full-frame shot at f2.8, now f4, and you can see it clearing up finally at f5.6. Here are a couple of pictures I took with my little film camera you saw at the beginning. You can see that the wider angle, narrow depth of field, and close focusing ability all combine to make some very nice pictures. Well, it's always refreshing to make a lens review when there are only good things you can say about the instrument in question. Is this an excellent lens? The answer is yes. But is it the right lens for you? The f2.8 aperture is good and lets in quite a lot of light, but you can do far better. This Canon 50mm f1.8 lens lets in more than twice as much light for slightly less money. In fact, keep an eye on my YouTube channel for an upcoming video directly comparing these two lenses. You could also be better off saving up for an f2.8 zoom lens, rather than this fixed 40mm one. But at the end of the day, this lens is all about cheapness and convenience. Having such a small lens makes it far easier to take your camera with you everywhere you go, and the best camera to have is always the one you can have with you. This would also make an excellent backup lens for anyone who's travelling, and on cuteness alone, it scores all kinds of brownie points. I had a great time testing this lens. The 40mm focal length is good for me, and it's a lot of fun, and it's nice to know that it's going to get razor sharp pictures every time. On those strengths, I can highly recommend this lens.